All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are here live to start the Year of the Monster, starting in March, as we had just decided we were going to do back in January. And we're going to be starting off with zombies. So we've kicked around a lot of ideas for some zombie movies, and we've kind of gone back and forth, and we've got some ideas, but really there's one solid ass place to start. So in a section that we're calling Zombie Month Awakens, we're going to start off the Year of the Monster, the month of the zombie, with The Serpent and the Rainbow, a Wes Craven movie from the early 80s that really sets a very different kind of tone than a lot of the zombie movies we're used to. This goes into the historical context of the word zombie and takes place in Haiti and is all about the voodoo concept of the zombie, not the person who has necessarily died and come back to life as much as the person who has been created to be brain dead and then used as a slave. So Dave, this was your pick to start us off with Zombie Month. So I mean, get us started, man. Tell us about what you think about The Serpent and the Rainbow.
I think that The Serpent and the Rainbow is one of those, like, I think like every director's got a couple of those movies where it's like everyone forgets that they directed them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how iconic you are, because Wes Craven is about as iconic as they come, and particularly in horror. And everyone will sing the praises of A Nightmare on Elm Street, rightfully so, and everyone will sing the praises of The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, and for a good reason. But this movie fucks, dude. This movie's awesome. And I remember the first time I saw this movie, and it was after I had discovered Wes Craven, and it was one of those movies where I was just like, I didn't recognize the title.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I guess I could skip this one. And I finally got to it sometime after college. And when I finally got around to this one, along with The People Under the Stairs, I was like, holy fuck, Wes Craven is more than just a one-trick pony.
Correct.
And I really started to realize that Craven is a god. Craven is watching Craven is like watching a masterclass in tension, in horror, but also in drama and in comedy. Like, there's a lot in this movie.
Yes.
And I think that the fact that none of the horror icons that you think of are in this movie helps the movie. It's Bill Pullman. Like, I see Bill Pullman and I think immediately Lone Star, and for a good fucking reason. Like, he's a really funny guy, and he made a lot of those kinds of movies, especially at this time. So to see him in something serious, because this very well could be a drama, to see him in something serious and to see him in something horrifying, terrifying, wow. It almost feels like a William Friedkin movie. Which for those of you who are the unwashed masses, this is your Exorcist, this is your French Connection. Like, it's almost documentary style the way it's shot, and I fucking love this movie. I'm so glad that this is where we're starting, because this was my suggestion, but it was your idea to do it first, and I think that this is the place to start.
Yeah, this movie ends up being so much. This is one where I did something very similar to you, like I got into Wes Craven, I got into a long time before I got like really into horror, just because I was into Nightmare. And so this was one where later on when I started to just expand beyond just watching Nightmare and Friday the 13th and stuff like that, and I started to really look into horror, and you start digging into these guys' catalogs. That's how I came across this one. Now, watching this last week, for anybody who was waiting for this one last week, some stuff came up. We're doing it now. But so watching this last week, it was the first time I've seen it in probably 20 years. So it was almost new. Yeah, like it was things. It was one of those things where things were surprising, but it was because I remembered what was going to happen just right before it happened. Yeah. And then I would be just in awe of it all over again. This is also just a really interesting place to start, because when you start to get into zombies and zombie lore, and you realize that zombie comes from like a Haitian word, a Haitian Creole word is how you get zombie. And that is where it all started. Most of the time now, especially now when we're, deep into a world where, The Walking Dead is over and it's got 4 spinoffs, and we've had all these movies for so long. By the way, the Wikipedia entry for just list of zombie movies is insane. There is such a glut of zombie movies for especially the past like 20 years. It's interesting to go back and see the origins of where the concept of the zombie came from. And that's what we explore with The Serpent and the Rainbow. So when you suggested it, it seemed like the perfect place to start, because it is, especially if you're suffering from zombie fatigue, like I think so many people are, because they're just, like I said, for a long time, it's been just a nonstop churning of these movies. And can we make a funny one? Can we make a dramatic one? Can we make an action one? Just how many different things can we do with the concept of the zombie? It's really interesting to go back and be like, wow, 40 years ago, somebody gave us a very tried and true formula for how to do an origin of the zombie movie with The Serpent and the Rainbow here. So I love that this feels fresh, because we're on the heels of so much zombie stuff. I mean, for God's sakes, there's an entire genre out there that's the zom rom-com now, right? Where like we're just constantly pounding a zombie into some other
the
genre.
Zombie Christmas movie.
Yeah, exactly. Been there. It was great. But
it was, yeah.
there's just so much. So it's really interesting to see that we can take a movie that's, like I said, 40 years old, and it feels fresh. That's what was really cool about watching The Serpent and the Rainbow now, is it feels like somebody, it's like, wow, somebody really went out of the box to make a new zombie movie. And it was like, no, somebody went out of the box a long time ago, instead of just following in the footsteps of Romero and these guys that were doing it at the time. So I really, really liked this movie. It's the fear factor on this is so weird. It's so unsettling so much of the time. This movie doesn't depend on somebody with their face falling off, biting a chunk out of somebody to be scary. There are so many elements of this movie that you can approach from that. One of the things that we go back to all the time, which is that dreamlike quality of a movie. Yeah. So often you're not 100% if this is actually happening, or if it's kind of in his head, because it starts with Pullman on a drug trip. Like one of the very first things we see is him wrestling a jaguar just to find out that it's not really there. Dude just did some sort of, Amazonian peyote and found his spirit animal, his token,
Which, if you have a connection for that, please email us at shiverpod.com at gmail.com, because I've been looking for that Amazonian peyote, and
that Amazonian peyote, man, it is something according to that. So everybody turns out a great job. Like, as we get into this, there's there's not a lot of places where this movie misses, and it's pretty great to go back to one that's this old and be like, yeah, still good, still a great story, still a bunch of wonderful characters. So super into this. Glad we started off with this one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's somewhat timeless. Because if you had told me that the movie took place in the 1940s, I would have believed it. And if you told me that the movie took place today, I would have believed it too. With the exception of a couple of special effects at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I think that there's no way to date this movie. Like, unless it's like, okay, well, Bill Pullman looks about this old and Wes Craven, was about this old when he made this movie. There's no way to know when this movie was made. And part of that, I think, is the approach that was taken with the movie. And a lot of that is in the story. So in a section that we're calling Potions, Spells, and Graveyards, Daniel, what is it about this particular story that works for you? You mentioned the dreamlike quality. I just talked a little bit about realism. What is it that really hits with this movie?
So what's incredible about this movie that makes it so timeless is one of those things that is partially like the kind of the history lesson that goes along with it. You don't have to be super adept in Haitian politics to know that the place is constantly in turmoil. It's just it's that type of country. It's the type of place that that is rife for U.S. takeover, for different dictatorships to just oust each other all the time. So that's part of what makes it timeless, is this amazing setting, right? So because most people, myself included, all I really know of Haiti is what I catch in the news occasionally when stuff is going on. So yeah, you could have told me that this movie was taking place in early 2000s. And it's like, oh, okay, because yes, a pharmaceutical company is trying to take advantage of a South American company in a South American country in turmoil. Yeah, that tracks, right? Like that could be happening right now, and probably is, if we're being 100% honest with ourselves.
Right.
So that part of it makes it last. But then when you get into the story, you get into the classic tale of guy who genuinely is trying to do something that he thinks is going to help the world, even if it's at the behest of a shitty superpower. Yeah, big pharma. Right? Like this guy really believes, Bill Pullman is in this thing. Dennis.
Yeah,
Denny. He really thinks he's going to change the world. And that sort of wide-eyed optimism always sets the stage for something great. But as you get into this movie, and there are just so many things that happen that you're just engrossed. You want to know about the guy who was found, Christopher, the guy who's found but still has his memories. You want to know more about the one girl who was buried too long and is mostly brain dead and doesn't remember anything. You want to learn about the Creole and the voodoo of all of this. My favorite part of this movie is just like the breakdown of the voodoo, hoodoo, Creole religion that they've got there. I can't think of her name all of a sudden. The main character, girl.
Marielle.
Marielle. Yeah, Dr. Duchamp. Well, at one point she says, we're it's 50% voodoo, 50% Christianity, and honestly, it's because it's all the same thing. Right. So you just get engrossed in this world. This is never approached as white guy out of place. We're given a very good character of an anthropologist who wants to be a part of everything. He's never looking down on any of this, even though, at the very beginning, he's talking about you can't locate the soul. You can't pinpoint the soul. So it doesn't exist. But then when he gets there and he's in it, you're just loving everything that's happening. You get this incredible cast of characters. This thing goes from highly scientific to souls in jars and everything in between. And it's all approached with that trademark Wes Craven, just steel-eyed seriousness. Like it's
almost academic.
Yes. I mean, even when, like, at this point, this is before Nightmare had gone off the rails and had, got in on the joke. This is when Nightmare on Elm Street was still approached as something very serious. Like, what if this dude attacked you in your dreams?
Yeah.
And that just seeps through where you're never made to, even as ridiculous as some of this stuff kind of gets from a completely objective standpoint, it's never presented comedically, except for when something is supposed to be kind of funny. And I think that sells the story in a huge way.
I think the humor only comes from how witty Dennis is.
Yeah.
Bill Pullman in this movie. And it's because of how smart and quick on his feet he is that there's any humor at all. Not just him, actually. I'm also going to say that the actor Zakes Moquet, who plays Petrod, is also in a very evil way, very funny.
Right.
And I think actually I've never thought this before. I've seen Serpent in the Rainbow now maybe 4 or 5 times, and I never thought this before watching it this time, but I got almost like a James Bond quality from the movie.
He does. And Patron feels like a James Bond villain.
He feels almost like a James Bond villain because Bond villains are, as outlandish as they are, they're always based on some sort of megalomaniacal, real world grounding that you find in real life, right? Like guys like Kim Jong-un inspire Bond villains, and much like almost any other Caribbean or South American country has these sorts of maniacs that come in and just wreak havoc, and the people are the ones that pay the price. And living in Miami, so close in proximity to Haiti, the Haitian culture is a big part of Miami. And I think it's very easy to forget that because Cubans are so loud. and thanks to Scarface, I think the entire world has this impression that Miami is pretty much like the white people that were here like in the time of Al Capone, and then Cubans, and it's really not that. It's such a melting pot. Like I went to school with a number of Haitian dudes, and that was part of the way you grew up here,
right?
And so being so close to that, like I heard stories about guys like Petrod, and growing up Cuban, we have our own stories of guys like Petrod, and so there is a realism there that I think is found in a lot of those early James Bond movies, like those pre-Roger Moore movies, the Sean Connery ones, where he's really just going up against like some guy who's got like a giant ego, and just wants to be the biggest guy in the room. And you look at him, you're like, but you're not the biggest guy in the room. And I think that that's really where this story is so great, because although you're right that he is the kind of guy who approaches things very academically, and like he's in love with culture, like he loves cultures. It's why he sits there and takes that Amazonian peyote. It's why he wants to go to Haiti and learn from Duchamp and be in the culture. He goes and sleeps out in the jungle because like that's how you come to really know a people, is not necessarily sleeping out in the jungle. I will say I've slept out in the jungle, and you do become one with the jungle. But it's there's something there. There's something there. There's a tangibility about living with a people, and he wants that. He absolutely wants that. It's I mention him every now and then, but it's part of what made Anthony Bourdain such a likable guy. Is he went out and just like lived with people and talked with people, and that's what he does as Dennis. He really wants to be, and so kind of that really understanding every man, which is what James Bond originally was, is that feeling that I get in this movie. But then there's also this duality that's going on there. You hinted at you didn't hint at it. You were just like, dude, the fucking dreamlike quality of this movie.
Yeah.
The dreams are not, I mean, they're not dreams. They're nightmares. They're absolute nightmares. And this is where you start to see some of that, like almost Romero style zombie there, but they're not there to eat your flesh. They're there to like absolutely terrify you, because this is the voodoo zombie. It's not the Walking Dead. And there's that, but then there's also the Petrod, and all the scenes that take place in real life are just as terrifying.
Yeah.
The scene where he's tortured, and we all know the scene that we're talking about, right? Like I there's no way I watch that scene and don't feel phantom pain. It's just it's one of those things where the first time I saw that, I had never seen any scene like that ever before. And the brilliance of Wes Craven is you don't see anything.
Right.
You see nothing. All you see is suggestion. And it's the screaming that I want to hear you scream when Petrod says that. And he comes in with you want to hear me scream? I'll scream. And he just starts like, this is from the fucking pit of his stomach.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's not enough. And then you hear the real scream.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm thinking about it now. And
and there's so much in this movie that is scary, from the torture like that to just the idea of a secret police that run, a country. So much, if all you think of when you think of Wes Craven is nightmare, then this next statement doesn't make any sense. But so often Wes Craven movies were so scary because of the realism that was put into it. You go to Last House on the Left and, just keep reminding yourself it's only a movie. It's only a movie, right? And as much as you want to remind yourself that this is only a movie, for a fact that there are countries run by dictators where the secret police, they're not the Gestapo, even though essentially they're the Tonton Macots.
The Tonton Macoute. Yeah,
Tonton Macoute. They're running this country. And so you've got this guy in Petrod who is already terrifying, and he's trapping people's souls and then using them to give what are some of the most effective nightmares that I've ever seen put on film. From being buried alive to drowning in, if you're watching us live, the picture in our background here, being in a casket that's filling with blood and drowning in it, to just all of these things that he's making people envision, because he has harnessed this voodoo power and is using it for evil, for his own gain. And so all of that in itself is scary, but then the visuals that we get, that bride when he falls asleep in the cemetery after the big ceremony.
That bride, fuck me, dude. I see it in my dreams randomly, and it'll be a year since I've seen the movie, and I'll see her, and she'll bring down her jaw, and the snake will come out, and I'll wake up in like a cold sweat.
Yes. I mean, and you're right. It's a Romero style zombie, while not being just a straight up, like Day of the Dead rip, right? It is more skeletal, because we're not talking about the living dead. We're talking about controlling the living and making it like they're dead, right? They're not the dead that have been brought back. They're the living who have been made dead. And so, but you get those scenes, all the stuff, just the constant use of snakes in this movie. I'm the type of person, I'm not afraid. Like, I don't have like an irrational fear of snakes. I have a very rational fear of snakes. Like, if I see one, I'm like, okay, there's a snake, I'm good. I leave it alone, especially if I don't know what it is, and I'm good. Like, I can go see them. I can watch a movie with snakes and I'm okay. But man, they're used so perfectly in a way that just, it's always building tension. So when you do get those moments that make you jump, that make you scream, they're tantric because you've been built up wanting to, like, you're so scared, like you need that release, but like you can't scream at just a random time when you're watching it because there's still terrifying things happening. Everything about this movie is scary, which I think is something that we don't get to say enough.
Yeah.
When we're talking about these horror movies, there's usually scary
genuinely
elements.
scary. Mhm.
Yes, every single thing about this is scary. The country in turmoil, the man who's completely out of place and lost, the people who are throwing parties and talking about invading people's dreams and stuff. All of that is scary. The fact that there's a guy who owns a bar because he killed the previous owner with a dream, that's scary. Even though he's not a scary guy, he's one of
the greatest characters in the movie.
And then he starts talking, and it's like, but you know what? This guy is scary because he holds the secret to creating a powder that can turn you into a zombie.
Right.
Everything about this movie can terrify you if you let it. And I did. I just let this movie wash over me. And the story going through all of the hoops that it goes through, and maybe voodoo's not real. Maybe these people are just, kind of being buried alive, or maybe it's just kind of bullshit that he's actually getting into people's dreams and he's just having nightmares. And the way that it just keeps circling back on itself, it tells you this is real, and then it's like, but it's not, so whatever, we'll move on. And it's like, no, here, seriously, it's real. Like it is this self-feeding machine of doubt that is incredible, topped off with some great special effects that we get out of and some purely 80s ones too, but some great special effects that we get in The Bride, and in some of the dream scenes where you're not even sure that it is a nightmare because it's just so good. Man, that fucking scene where he's asleep in like the cabana with Duchamp, right? And you're not sure if he's still dreaming or whatever, and that boat rides up on the beach.
What a scene,
with the flaming bride on it, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. Then suddenly he's in a casket and he's looking up, and then all of a sudden dirt starts pouring in and you realize he's laying down. Masterfully shot. And it taps into so many things. Like I'm not the type of person who's like, I fear being buried alive. I know it would suck, but it doesn't keep me awake at night.
Well, it's kind of an irrational fear. Like, what are the chances?
But drowning bothers me. I spend a lot of time I'm a big pool beach guy. I love the water. So drowning does scare me. And so then it's like, oh, he's being buried alive. Okay, yeah, this is intense. And then it's like, oh my God, now he's going to drown in blood. This is horrifying. And it really this was, again, Wes Craven's ability to scare, to tap into some of the simplest things that keep you awake at night is unprecedented. The guy was absolutely masterful in all of it. And this movie showcases so much of that. For one, that I feel like doesn't get mentioned enough when people talk about Wes Craven. I feel like even though this should be the one that people are always talking about, I feel like this one gets left out of the conversation far too often.
It absolutely does. And interestingly enough, I feel like I don't want to sound like a dick here, but I know I'm going to sound like a dick here. I feel like for those that are either casual horror fans or have never really dived into horror very much, maybe they just stay on the surface and they know what's popular, they know the good stuff, they think of Nightmare on Elm Street. But I have found that with the real horror nerds, and I use that term with affection,
right?
When we think of Wes Craven, sure, we think of Nightmare on Elm Street, but we also think of Last House on the Left. We also think of The Hills Have Eyes. We also think of The People Under the Stairs. We also think of The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Yeah.
And there's like a whole another career that he found with Scream. And that trilogy of films that he made is like perfect in its own way. But I feel like of all the movies that he made, The Last House on the Left and The Serpent and the Rainbow occupy this space of extreme horror.
Yeah.
That nothing else, maybe The Hills Have Eyes, come close to occupying that sort of space, where I watch those movies and there's a shrinking that happens into the couch, into the bed, into the chair, into wherever I am. And if there's a blanket nearby, the blanket comes onto me.
Yeah.
If there's a sweater, my hands get sucked into the sleeves, and I want to be as close to myself as possible because I'm terrified that anything that's outside of my immediate bubble will lead to that.
Right.
And I think that I won't say he's alone in occupying that space, because I think that there's a couple directors like Tobe Hooper and Dario Argento that can do that to me. But there's very few guys that can do that to me. Today, I think only Ari Aster can do that. But but wow, there's something here. And to the point you made about the snake, I have fought 2 snakes in my life, and they happen actually like within a year of.
I love that it's not just encountered, like you full blown fought the snake.
I full blown fought a snake. And the first time I was not certain. It was not until later where like I analyzed the picture that I took of the snake and went to Reddit. And I was like, hey, Reddit, help me out. Was this thing fucking poisonous? And it was not. It was a North American racer. Had it bit me in the face, which it nearly did, I would have been fine. But the second time, it was a water moccasin.
Ooh.
Which is one of the deadliest snakes that we have here in the South. You being a good Southern boy, much like myself, in the northernmost province of Havana, we know that you see this snake and you turn around and run.
Yeah.
And I had no chance to turn around and run because of the situation that I was in. I had to fight this thing because I had to get it out of the house.
Oh.
And it was quite literally the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And so I put myself in Dennis's position where like this snake is lunging at him. And like my palms are getting sweaty right now just thinking about it. Like it is terrifying. If you've never had to face a snake in that way before, it's just the worst thing in the world because you have no idea what it's thinking. None at all.
Yeah.
I can look at a dog and tell you that thing's going to lunge at me right now. But a snake, no idea.
Yeah, no, like, and see, so for me, like I said, my fear of snakes is very rational. I do have an irrational fear of spiders. And if there's
it's not irrational.
If there's anything that got me, like that just got me in this movie, it's when he's burying Dennis alive. He puts a fucking tarantula on his face and he's paralyzed at that moment. And he can't do anything about the fact that this massive hair, that this is the one that's making me sweat. There's a massive hairy spider crawling on his face when he's fully conscious of what's going on and can do nothing to stop it. That is undone only more by the fact that eventually he's going to come to and be able to move, and then moving is just going to piss the spider off. I assume that all big hairy spiders have the ability to kill me. That's just where I stand in life. If I can see the hair on the spider, it can probably kill me. Is that true? No, absolutely not. Will I ever believe that it's not true? No. So again, simple little things. It's we reached that point in the movie and it's like, oh, we buried a couple people alive. Yeah, sure, that's scary, but maybe it's not getting to you. Here you go. I put a spider on this guy's face. You're welcome, Daniel. Now you can cringe too. It's the simplest stuff like that. It didn't need a lot of buildup. It didn't need any sort of dramatic moment when it happened. We just needed a spider to be put. The idea of being in a small box with a spider makes me want to die. Like I would have moved beyond paralyzed from the powder at that point, and I would simply perish if I were trapped in a box with a spider like that, because my heart would just explode. And so just the simplicity of some of the stuff like that at the very beginning, when they're trying to see if the guy is dead or not, and they just take a needle and shove it right
and
up in his
that the
eye.
guy's dead, but it's like, oh
yeah. And again, you're just looking at it going, it's so easy. It's so easy to terrify people. And in a time when everyone is always trying to yes and each other, and everyone's always trying to one up what just did. And I love Eli Roth, but his entire career is based on, I can do that bigger, scarier, and gorier. This is a movie full of moments that go, you really don't have to reinvent the wheel to scare the shit out of people. You just have to be able to tap into what the human race is scared of. And Wes Craven understood that.
It's visuals.
Yeah.
It's visuals and it's audio. It's those two things together, and it's finding the right balance with them. And since we're talking about that, I think that a big part of selling the visual is in the cast. And so in a section that we're going to call Liberators and Enslavers, Daniel, who in the cast just you have to talk about?
Okay. This cast is incredible. We could end up spending a long time here. Since I'm going first, I am going to grab the bull by the horns. And Louis Mozart is one of my favorite characters in horror history. The dude is kind of a voodoo priest, kind of a chemist, all around insane, and he loves to just drink and cheat white people out of their money. Go for it, man. I love this guy. Like he was so great. I mean, played by Brent Jennings. He was just this amazing character who kind of starts off as just a dude in a bar who maybe has the secret, maybe doesn't. He's like, oh yeah, I'll make your powder. Watch me kill this goat. Ha ha ha. But then you find out, then he gets this great moment of character development when Dennis is like, I'm going to use your powder to change the world. And for the first time ever, this guy like feels seen. If that's the right way to put it. I mean, this is the guy who, like I said,
tell them the name of Louis Mozart.
Yeah, he killed someone with a nightmare to take the guy's bar. And so you're thinking, it's just like, he just wanted a bar. But then it's like, they're going to know the name Louis Mozart. I'm going to change the world. He gets such a great arc from that moment to sneaking onto the plane and making sure that Dennis gets the powder to take back to the States, and but then still taking his watch and all of that stuff. He ends up getting such a great little arc, and he's treated with such respect by Dennis, which also makes it amazing. Even when Dennis is, 100% sure of the fact that he's just completely bamboozling him. He's like, yeah, it was probably rat poison, and he knows that. He knows that that Louis was going to completely try to screw him on all of it. He still is just in it. He still wants no part, or he still wants Louis to show him how it's done. He wants to know the science of it. He wants to know the chemistry of it. All of that is very important to him. And I just love that he gets that moment.
And the magic was part of it too.
Yeah.
He notes down, because I feel like the wrong anthropologist would have approached this from a purely scientific approach, and said, okay, so what are the chemicals that we need for this, and nothing else. But you see Dennis meticulously jotting down everything, absolutely everything,
right?
And he really respects Mozart.
Yes.
Which is I think that that's needed in the movie for us to believe the Mozartiness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just so I loved him as a character. I thought that he got this amazing development. I thought that everything about him, he was fun, but the respect that he showed to it all when he made that shift into, I'll make your powder, that was just incredible. I loved it.
Since you mentioned I don't want to call him a minor character, but not, one of the main cast. I'm going to do the same. And Paul Winfield as Lucien Celine is, Paul Winfield is one of these guys that, from like the earliest memories that I have, I've been a fan of this guy. Because going back to the original Terminator and Star Trek, dude, like Paul Winfield is the man.
Yeah.
He's the absolute man. And like I always love seeing him in movies. There's a likability to him. And you immediately believe everything he's telling you, and his role as this like pseudo politico, pseudo priest, pseudo like, you just, yeah, man, whatever you tell me, I'm here and I'm gonna listen to you and we're gonna have a good time. And his death is one of those that I think I mentioned I've seen this movie 4 or 5 times now. It always hurts when he dies. It always hurts because there's not many people that I think Dennis can count amongst his friends in Haiti. He also, I don't think, has too many enemies either. But as far as like, this is a friend, this is someone I can count on, Lucien's one of those guys. And so it hurts because obviously the person that you're supposed to identify with in this movie is Dennis. And so I see the movie through his eyes. And when Dennis dies, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. And his smile is one that I think the movie could have used more of, but that's also kind of why Winfield is so great, because he's this awesome character actor that's in the movie for less time than you want him to be.
Yeah. He's he kind of, like he gets an interesting shift too from the beginning when he's like, you kind of just feel like, okay, well, he's like, he's knowledgeable of it and he's, but it doesn't seem like it kind of runs his life. You first meet him and he's at the party and everybody's getting possessed and I think they call it being ridden, right?
Ridden. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everybody's getting possessed and being ridden and you're like, okay, so this is just like a part of his life and he acknowledges it, but then he gets this change into being this guy who he's real, like he's a top tier dude, and he's actively helping Dennis be protected against these things. And he ends up being a guy that you end up really liking and who gets, a really cool kind of finale, even after he dies. Like you said, it's once he does die, you're like, man, I wish I'd gotten a little bit more of him. And he gets a good conclusion to his story. So he is another one that's really good. I mean, we've talked a lot about Dennis, and all of the things that make him a great character. I think the other side of that coin being how amazing Dr. Duchamp is, right? Like Kathy Tyson as Marielle Duchamp, she is interesting. There's a moment where she says, my belief in science and my religion aren't at odds with each other, or something to term on those kinds of terms, because he's having a hard time wrapping his head around how can she be a doctor and a scientist and buy into all of this voodoo, and she, you know, she never downplays it. She says, I was ridden for the first time when she was like 6 or 7 or something, and she was possessed, and she approaches it with an austere, if that's the right word, right? Like she respects all of it. She understands that she can be a doctor and a scientist, but she can still hold these sound religious beliefs because she lives in a place where all of this stuff is happening simultaneously all the time. And so, and it was, I never felt like she was putting on. Like, I never felt like Kathy Tyson was straining to give me this understanding of Dr. Duchamp. I really enjoyed that aspect of her character.
I think that having actresses like Tyson in there who really understand these characters helps sell that documentary style filmmaking that Craven was going for here, because it really does feel like a real person. This doesn't feel like an actress playing a role. This doesn't feel like anything other than you pointed a camera at someone and caught a moment in time. And I think that's part of what growing up in Miami has taught me, is that whether it's voodoo or Santeria or whatever, like there's shit that people believe to varying degrees and just accept whether they believe it or not. It's just like, oh, yeah, well, that's just the thing. And I think I think I'm a perfect example of that. Like, I am the most religious, spiritual person you'll ever meet. My kids are baptized.
Yeah.
You know, and if you ask me why, I'll tell you why not.
Yeah.
Because you know, and it's partly cultural, and it's also partly but what if, because it's so ingrained in your upbringing, right? She was ridden at 6. It's so ingrained in you that it's a part of you, whether you want it to be or not, because you know the brain in her is saying, like, I understand psychology. I know what it is that, you know, this person is going through. And then the other part of her heart is telling her, no, you really understand that, like, this thing is really happening. And I think every culture has that sort of duality about it. And I don't know if Kathy Tyson is Haitian or of Haitian descent, but she sure as fuck sells it.
Yes.
She absolutely does. The last person that I'll mention, and you're right, we've talked about Pullman the whole time. He's the fucking man. All right, I love Bill Pullman. Bill, if you ever watch this, like, fucking, I love you, dude. Zakes Moquet, and I know I'm probably fucking that name up. Petrod. Wow, this guy is fucking diabolical.
Oh my God.
There's something about him where he feels so small and yet so big at the same time. And it can't just be that, like, the camera caught him at the right angles. It can't just be that Craven knows how to present people within a camera screen. Like, it's gotta be that this guy was just fucking brilliant. And if there is any one person that I think, aside from Pullman, who I think does carry this movie, but if there's any one person in addition to Pullman, who you can say this is his movie, it's him. Because whether it's in reality or in the dreamscape or in like whatever sort of like weird voodoo world that dream and reality is taking place in at the end of the movie, he's terrifying. He's absolutely terrifying. And it's his delivery. And this guy could, by all accounts, be the nicest guy in the world. I'm sure that he's a great dad. I'm sure he's a great grandpa. I'm sure that, you know, he's the type of guy who tips well at restaurants. But fuck, I never want to meet him in real life. The former co-host Jeff, his wife is terrified of Tony Todd because she saw Candyman at the right age, and she was just like, nope. No fucking way am I ever meeting him. I've been to conventions with them, and she will turn and run at the sight of Tony Todd. That's how I think I would react. If I saw Petrod in real life, I would turn and run. There's something about this guy, and it's not just that he drove a giant nail through Bill Pullman's scrotum. There's something about this guy. There's a gravitas to him. There's an evil to this guy. And maybe it's just that I look at him and I see Fidel Castro. Maybe I look at him and I see Hugo Chavez. Maybe it's I don't know. But it's something about him.
And it's because in that, like those scenes where he's not being outwardly just awful to people, he still seems so evil. The moments where he's being nice, if you will,
it's,
you know,
in
and he's
his charisma.
Yes,
it is. It's the politician in him where I'm like, fuck, dude, you're scary. You're scary in the real way.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's the fact that he's scary even when he's not torturing people or cutting someone's head off or trapping a soul in a jar. You know, he's scary when he's just warning you about what it's like to be in this country. He's scary because he's the head of a secret police who seem to have limitless power in what they can do to the residents of this town. So you get this guy who, you're right, there is a charisma to him, and it's that chaotic evil charisma. You know, so often we think about the word charisma, and even, you know, if you're a D&D player, you know, you think about charisma and you think about it as charming, you know, the guy at the gate so you can get in. You know, you don't think about the fact that intimidation is a charisma check, not a strength check.
Right.
Because of guys like Petrod. He's the guy who makes you understand why intimidation is a charisma thing, not a strength thing. Because no voodoo, nothing involved. I'd like to think I could go toe to toe with this guy. He's not physically imposing.
No.
You know, it doesn't look like all he does is bang and clang, you know, like he looks like just a normal dude. But I'm so scared of him. And I'm so intimidated by every look on his face and everything he does. And the actor so perfectly, like you said, Zakes Moquet, he so perfectly embodied all of that. The very first time you see him and he's just sitting at that table over at the party, and all he really does is, you know, tap that glass with his knife. And it's like, I don't even know why that scares me. Like, I don't know why that's bothering me, but I can look at this guy and know that this is bad. I just, you get that feeling. And he was, the weird thing about him was we weren't led to believe that an insane amount of time passed between Pullman leaving and coming back. But when he comes back, he's like completely gray. So then you start to like wonder if just all of this voodoo is actually just draining his life force, which again was a great kind of costuming decision to do, because I never once was like, oh, this doesn't make sense. I immediately had all this headcanon for why the dude is suddenly gray, and I was fine with it. And I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is not an exact character that we need to talk about as we go forward, but there is a major thing here, and it's going to be one that we're going to repeat throughout the month, and that is we've got to talk about the zombies. Like I said at the top, we're really starting with the Haitian Creole zombie. And so what did you think about this portrayal of zombies on film that we're given in The Serpent and the Rainbow?
Look, man, I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show, but this is the most traditional view of zombieism that I think there is. Because the zombie was someone that a voodoo priest controlled. That's
Right.
what zombies were until George Romero and John Russo turned the term zombie into something else. And it's just been, I mean, it just happens to have been 60 years since these guys have done this. And, you know, it's kind of crazy to think that it's been that long, but it's been 60 years. And in those 60 years, we now in the social zeitgeist think zombie, and we think The Walking Dead. We think
Right.
The Night of the Living Dead. We don't think voodoo zombie anymore unless you happen to be in that cult. And I think that this movie gets back to that in a really great way, in a really effective way, and manages to combine the traditional Haitian voodoo zombie with the flesh eater,
Right.
at least in look, in a way that works for me. Because when you see the bride, immediately you think, that's a fucking zombie. You know it. You know it's a zombie. My dog could tell it's a zombie. Granted, she's a smart dog. She's very smart. And she's a very good girl. But she could tell it's a zombie. And I think my grandmother could tell that's a zombie. And
Right.
and I think that's the perfect example that can use. Like, that's a zombie. But you know what else is a zombie? Christoph. Christoph is a zombie. And
Yeah.
he's a zombie in the most classic, in the oldest way possible. He's a zombie because he was dead. And
Yeah.
was he? No, maybe not scientifically, he wasn't dead. But to the people around him, he was. And was he in Petraud's grasp? Yeah, because if we believe what's going on in the movie, if we believe the canon of the movie, Petraud's got his soul, and therefore can't control him. But when Petraud's not driving him, when he's not being ridden, right? He can do things like save Dennis.
Right.
And that to me is why this movie works so well. The thing that ties this movie together beyond the great story, because it really is an awesome, like, whodunit mystery is what you've got going on here, right? Beyond the acting, beyond the direction, beyond the cinematography, beyond the music. The music's fucking stellar in
Yes.
this movie, right? Beyond all that, the use of the zombie as a tool, as a delivery service for horror, is just unmatched, I think, here.
Yeah, there's something about this version of, well, there's not something about it. This version of zombie is far scarier to me than the Living Dead zombie, in the fact that if you came back as a decaying corpse, you're a nightmare for everyone who knew you or runs into you, especially the people who knew you. Right, it's far worse for them than it is for you. This version, the Haitian Creole zombie, makes it a nightmare and a horror for you, the zombie, because you're aware of what's going on. So there's the aspect of, you know, like just the being buried alive, which is already scary, but then being brought back, being mostly brain dead, and somebody having your soul and being able to control you and you're aware of what's going on and you can't control yourself. That is scarier. Now the terror is for the people around you who knew you, who are watching you do these awful things, and for you who can't stop yourself from doing these terrible things. And so this version of the zombie, while not as grotesque, is far scarier. And that's where this again taps into a different element of being scared of the zombie. This taps into that idea of not being in control of yourself, of somebody else forcing you into something that you don't want to do. That gets way scarier than just being a walking brainless corpse, because for you, your lights are out at that point. That's only scary to the people around you. This one becomes terrifying to everyone involved, and then is made scarier by the fact that there is someone actively doing this to you. There's an evil out there. There's the idea that, like, the Romero zombies, they're not inherently evil. They just are. They're a brain stem that's doing the one thing it needs to do, which is eat. This is an evil person making you an evil tool, and that's way scarier. So this, I think, is an excellent place to start, not only because of the fact that this is the origins of the zombie, but also because this is the scariest version of the zombie itself. There are plenty of ways to make hordes of zombies and situations with zombies scary, but the actual zombie itself doesn't get any scarier than this version.
I have to agree. So that leaves us with just one thing left to do, which is to rate the movie. And if you are new to Shiver, this might be a little confusing to you. To our longtime listeners, you'll know exactly what's going to happen here. We don't use stars. We believe that every movie should be rated against itself. So we've mentioned George Romero and Night of the Living Dead and Dawn and Day and, that whole fantastic series. We've mentioned countless Wes Craven movies. We're not rating this movie against those because we believe every movie should be rated only against itself. Movies are what they are and nothing more. So Daniel and I confabbed before the beginning of the show, and we decided that we were going to use as a metric for this episode scrot nails. So, Daniel, out of a possible 5 scrot nails, how many scrot nails do you give The Serpent and the Rainbow?
So the only reason that I'm having any sort of moment of being torn here is I'm trying to decide whether or not this movie is perfect, right? Because it's at least 5. So I'm trying to go back through it, and I'm trying to decide. And I think that this movie is one that you can recommend to anyone who will be able to find the terror in it. I think that it is an absolutely seminal moment in the zombie genre. And so I don't know that there's any way that I can get away from going 6 out of 5 scrot nails on this. I think that this movie hits every single note perfectly. We've talked about the characters, the story, the special effects, the music. I mean, even some of those dated special effects from the end, they're still great, and they still work in that moment, and they're mystical feeling, which suits the movie. Even the scene where he's fighting the chair, kind of, which is definitely feels like a scene straight out of Nightmare on Elm Street. Like when the chair's moving and stuff, you could have put that in any Nightmare movie and it would have fit. I think that there's absolutely nothing that you can dock this movie on, and I got to go 6 out of 5 scrot nails.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Because the way I see it is, I would easily give this movie 5 scrot nails, and there happens to be 2 scrot nails in this movie, and I don't know that the second scrot nail counts because he was already kind of dead, right?
It's actually the same scrot nail. It's really just the one scrot nail that's used twice.
Yeah. So 2 scrotes, 1 nail, which is the sequel to 2 Girls, 1 Cup. So it's got to get 6. It's got to get 6.
It's got to get 6.
Because, like you said, this is perfect. There's perfect, and then there's perfect. And so this movie is perfect. a perfect 6 out of 5 scrot nails for the Serpent and the Rainbow. So if you stuck with us, because we did see that there was at least one person who was sticking with us this whole time here. Thank you. If you're listening, watch live and interact with us, because we really do enjoy that. We are only just getting started with, and I do realize that it is the 14th of March, but we are just getting started with our month of the zombie, and we plan to keep it going next week and the week after with some more zombie love. Do we want to say what our next zombie movie is going to be, Daniel?
So we're going to go from back in the 80s, traditional voodoo zombie. We are going to fast forward way up into the 2020s, late teens, and we're going to go to a different side of the world. And we're going to head to South Korea. And next week, we will be doing Train to Busan, which goes the other way with it. Still drama, but adds some action to the zombie genre, but also a story to be told. So we'll be doing the Korean movie Train to Busan next week. We should be back on Wednesdays by next week. Thank you to everybody who's hung around and was there with us, even though our schedule's been a little wonky. We're going to rectify that. We'll be back to it. Make sure you head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media. Our Instagram's been real quiet this week. I've been super busy, but it will be back with updates, memes, all that fun stuff. You can also find links to all of our social media on shiverpod.com, as well as our TeePublic shop, where you can pick up shirts with our logos. We love to hear from you guys. You can email us, DM us if you want to be on the show. If you're listening now and you love Train to Busan, let us know. We'll probably have you on next week.
Absolutely. So, on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.